Welcome to this explainer where we're going to unlock the hidden logic behind English quantifiers. Have you ever paused mid-sentence, totally panicked about whether you should use much, many, some, or any? Well, you definitely aren't alone. Today, we are breaking down the invisible rules of how we quantify things in English so you literally never have to guess again. So, let's kick things off with a bit of a puzzle. Why is it that we so confidently say, I have a lot of money, but the absolute second we ask a question about it, we suddenly switch to, how much money do you have? Native speakers are constantly swapping out their vocabulary based entirely on whether they're asking a question, denying something, or making a positive statement. But why does this happen? What exactly is the hidden mechanism pulling the strings here? To solve this, we first need to quickly get our terms straight. A quantifier is, well, exactly what it sounds like. It quantifies. It's a word that tells us how much or how many of something we're dealing with. Grammatically speaking, these are those tricky little words that sit right before nouns and sometimes before adjectives or adverbs just to give us the exact amount. We're talking about words like several, plenty, enough, few, and little. Now, the absolute core foundation of using these words correctly relies on one incredibly simple distinction. Before you even think about picking a quantifier, you have to ask yourself, is your noun countable or uncountable? Countable nouns are the individual things you can actually physically count, like 1 apple, 2 chairs, 3 books, or 4 people. Uncountable nouns, on the other hand, are your bulk substances or abstract concepts. Think water, money, sugar, or information. You wouldn't walk into a restaurant and order 1 water or ask her boss for 2 monies, right? Recognizing this division is step 1 in mastering the logic. Section 1. The master key. Affirmative statements, questions, and negative sentences. Moving to step 2. This is where things get really fascinating. The type of sentence you're building completely dictates the quantifier you're allowed to use. Let's look at some versus any as our first real-world example. Some is strictly designated for affirmative sentences, basically positive statements where something is true, and it's also used for offers. But any, that is the exact tool you must reach for when you're forming questions or creating negative sentences. Think about a basic request. Can I have some water? Now, even though there's a question mark at the end of that sentence, it's actually a request hoping for a positive outcome, so some works perfectly there. But what happens when the sentence becomes negative? The moment you say, I don't have, the word some is immediately disqualified. Any instantly jumps in to save the day, giving us, I don't have any water. It's a strict structural rule, not just a stylistic preference. And you know what? This exact same sentence type rule applies to much and many. We already established that much is for uncountable nouns and many is for countable ones. But here is the really critical takeaway. Both of these words are your ultimate go-to choices, specifically when you are asking questions or building negative sentences. Let's see that play out in practice. If you have a negative sentence with an uncountable noun, you'd say, I don't have much money. That sounds completely natural. But the absolute second you flip that into an affirmative, positive statement, much drops right out. You wouldn't typically say, he has much money. Honestly, you'd sound like a 19th century aristocrat. Instead, the phrase a lot of swoops in for affirmative sentences, and it functions brilliantly for both countable and uncountable nouns. He has a lot of money. Perfect. Section 2, the vibe shift. Positive versus negative meanings. Now, we're going to look at a pretty wild grammatical quirk where a tiny, almost invisible change drastically alters the entire emotion of your sentence. Believe it or not, simply adding or dropping the single letter A before certain quantifiers completely flips their meaning from positive to negative. Let me show you exactly what I mean here. Let's take the quantifier few, which we use for countable nouns. If you drop the A and just say, I have few friends, you're essentially saying you have almost none. It carries this heavily negative, honestly quite sad connotation. You're emphasizing a lack of friends. But simply by adding that little letter A, saying I have a few friends totally transforms the vibe. It means you have some, you have enough. Suddenly, it's a happy, positive statement. And the exact same logic applies to our uncountable nouns when we use little. Stating I have little money strongly implies you have a huge problem. You're practically broke. It's a highly negative vibe. But add the A and I have a little money means you have some. Hey, you might not be buying a yacht today, but you're doing okay. It represents a positive amount. It's absolutely amazing how much heavy lifting that single letter A is doing in English. Section 3, fixing common mistakes. Putting your new framework to the test. So, knowing your noun's countability and figuring out whether your sentence is affirmative, negative, or a question makes spotting errors super easy. Take the mistake, I have much money. We know that's an affirmative statement, so we swap out much for a lot of, giving us the totally natural, I have a lot of money. Next mistake, many water. Well, water is uncountable, so many is clearly wrong. We fix that right up to much water. And finally, I don't have some money. That's a negative sentence. And we know some is reserved for affirmatives, so we swap it for any, resulting in the correct phrasing, I don't have any money. So, putting it all together, we have a complete framework. This summary cheat sheet maps out the key quantifiers, their specific countability rules, and their deeper meanings. It really highlights how words like any are intimately tied to your negative sentences and questions, while some and a lot of confidently handle all those affirmative statements. It's like a neat little matrix for English grammar. To wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with one final test. Look at this sentence. I don't have blank money. You've got two choices here, much or many. Based on the countability of the word money and the glaring fact that this is a negative sentence, which word perfectly fills in the blank? Apply the framework we just built and you'll know exactly which one to choose. Thanks for exploring this with me today. Honestly, it makes you wonder, what other invisible rules are controlling the way you speak right now without you even realizing it? Keep questioning the everyday things, and I'll see you next time.